We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
All right, thank you for waiting, and welcome everyone to another exciting Reddit talk here on our food. My name is Meg, and I am also joined by my co-host LJ. She's little LJ.
Hi.
We'll be your hosts for today, and we're also the hosts of Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes, a podcast that reviews and recaps all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons. You can find us on your favorite podcatcher. And today, it is our absolute pleasure to welcome Chef Ji Hye Kim as our guest. Ji Hye Kim is the award-winning chef owner of Miss Kim, an acclaimed Korean restaurant in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Chef Kim grew up in Seoul, South Korea, and is obsessed with ancient Korean culinary texts and the finer points of fermentation. Ji Hye was also named one of Food & Wine's Best New Chefs of 2021 and is a James Beard Award Best Chef semifinalist. Thank you so much for being here, Ji Hye.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And for everyone tuning in, if you've never joined us before, this is a Reddit talk. It's basically like an audio AMA. So you get to ask questions to Ji Hye. So for about the next hour, we will be chatting with her. And if you want to ask a question, you just have to join this talk and raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. And then if you receive an invite to come up on stage, please accept that invite. And then when prompted to do so by one of us, you can unmute yourself to ask your question and chat. And you mute and unmute by clicking the microphone icon. If you're feeling a little bit shy, we'll also be checking the written comment section of this post and looking for questions there. But we really encourage everyone to take advantage of this opportunity to chat with Ji Hye. So we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Go ahead and click that raised hand icon. And before we get to that, while we're waiting for folks to join us on stage, I'm going to throw it over to LJ to ask our first question.
Hi, Ji Hye. Really excited to speak with you today. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fantastic.
Great. So I've been doing a little bit of reading about you and your career and what you're up to. And I've seen you say in some interviews that you didn't start thinking about becoming a chef until you were 30, which I find quite interesting myself because I'm 37 now, which feels really old, I think, to my former self. But I often think about, oh no, it's too late to change careers. And I would probably have thought that at 30 as well. Why do you think that you decided at 30? Like, why was that the turning point?
Well, it was up until, okay. So I actually left my old career at age 27. And then I thought to myself, this is the first time where I have the means to really be able to think about what I would like to do in life instead of what I have to do, because up until that point, I was either poor-ish or I was out of status with my visa and there was only limited things that I can do in terms of work. So at age 27, I felt like, I'm going to give myself 3 years to fuck around and then find out what I want to do. And by age 30, I decided that I wanted to do something that felt more real and than what I was doing before, because I was doing a lot of office work and accounting related work, insurance related work, and that work is real. But for me personally, like to be able to touch something that I'm creating and you get to eat it at the end of the day, that felt way more immediate and tactile, and that's what I wanted to do.
That's great.
LJ, 30 is young. 27
30
is go for it.
I'm 37 and I'm saying 30 is definitely young.
Yes.
I laugh at my former self for thinking 30 was old now, but yeah, no, I think that's really inspiring though to, it's never too late kind of thing. It's fine. So we've got a couple of people that have joined the stage. Not sure who was first. Let's go with Edokquin. Do you want to share your question with Ji Hye? Just unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hello. Yes. I know the vibes. I've done a few of these before. Hello. And it's Edokquin, but it's all good. I'm trying to take the Camille Foster approach to pronouncing my name. It's phonetic. It's Edokquin. I wanted to ask the chef. I'm not as well versed in Korean cuisine, full disclosure. So could you tell me what is your favorite culturally authentic dish, or if that's maybe too hard, what's a dish that's less well known or less popular that you wish people did know more about, potentially?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's always difficult to pinpoint one dish to represent the entire cuisine, but I think if I had to really pick one, I would say it's kimchi, mostly because I think people think of kimchi as a dish or a side dish or spicy pickled napa cabbage, but kimchi is as much a technique as it is a dish. So if you understand the fundamentals of how kimchi is generally made, then you can turn anything into kimchi. So kimchi is usually, you know how people say pickle when you order a sandwich and that's assumed to be cucumber pickle, but you can pickle anything. The same thing with kimchi. So if you say kimchi, people assume napa cabbage kimchi, and that is correct, but you can also kimchify anything, and it's a seasonal product. So generally, it's a preservation technique. You salt whatever you want to preserve, and then you drain the water, like draw the water and moisture out of it. And then once that process is done, then you add whatever flavorings that you want, whether that's fish sauce or chili flakes or usually ginger and garlic. And I think that's really representative of Korean culture, that you have this like a broad category of fermentation and preservation, and you can make that into a seasonal product. You can pickle, you can kimchify napa cabbage or radish or even a piece of fish or eggplants or corn. So I think those that I would say is emblematic of Korean cuisine.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Kimchi-fy, great verb. But while we're on the topic of kimchi, you described kimchi, I want to say it was in a New York Times article, as being like a zombie. It's not quite dead nor alive. And to me, kimchi strikes me as perhaps a Korean dish that someone could easily make if they, for example, don't have access to other essential Korean ingredients, like say gochujang or something like that. So if you're someone who doesn't have easy access to ingredients you might find in a Korean grocer, would kimchi be a good recipe to make, or would there be another traditional Korean dish you might suggest?
No, I think kimchi is a really great thing to try because it is so versatile. There's over 200 types of documented kimchi, so you can kind of feel assured that there's no wrong way to make kimchi. I think the most essential ingredient is salt. Salt is the thing that's going to suspend that ingredient that you're trying to preserve in the safe zone, that like undead zone. And then after that, once you have good salt and whatever vegetable you want to preserve, you can spice it up however as you like, or you can turn it into vegan following the Korean Buddhist cuisine. Salt the vegetable and throw ginger, garlic, or herbs you like in there. You can throw whatever chili flakes that you have in your fridge. I think as long as you keep it under the brine, so the environment in that jar is safe, and then you can, after a day or so, you can keep it in the fridge. It's pretty much pickling, and you can have so much fun with it.
Great, I love that. And I've never really thought about kimchi, applying the technique of kimchi to I always think of it as just cabbage, so that's good to know, because I'm not a massive fan of cabbage, but I do like kimchi. But I always think that would be great applied to eggplant. That sounds great. And things like that. So I'm actually going to pull a question from the comments. I have a question from user Empty Space 23. They've asked, how do Korean people feel about fake meat? So like impossible meat. I know you can't necessarily answer for all Korean people, but how do you feel about fake meat? Do you use it ever?
I personally do not, just because I have a lot of vegan and vegetarian tradition that I can pull from. We have tofu and Buddhist cuisine that's been around for a long time. And I think in these days, I don't think it's necessarily that important for your diet to have protein in every single meal. I think, vegetarian food is beautiful as is. You don't have to have an imitation meat, like turn it into something it's not.
As a relatively new vegetarian, I like the fake meat sometimes, but I totally agree that like vegetarian meals are so strong on their own and delicious that you don't need a substitute.
Yeah, you have beans, you have like a lot of things that has protein already innately. You don't have to try to fake a burger.
Exactly. All right, we have Chowders on the stage. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, I don't really have a question because I was going to ask regarding halal Korean food, but I don't know if that's an option.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, at my restaurant, we just get halal chicken from our meat vendor and the butchers just because I find it to be generally fresher. But
No,
yeah, I don't necessarily know exactly the right way to do the halal food. I do know that there are a lot of immigrants in Korea itself and has a good amount of Muslim community that follows halal and have halal restaurants available in Seoul, which I think to see that diversity in Seoul is amazing.
that's so cool because like from where I'm from South Africa. So basically it's difficult to find Korean food where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this red paste you guys have? The red paste?
Gochujang? Yeah.
Yeah.
Gochujang?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find that so bad, but like I can't find it. And I can't find the halal version of it because I think I don't know. I think it contains, I'm not sure, but I think it contains something like pork or alcohol in it, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So gochujang, very, very traditionally made gochujang should not have any meat products in it.
Okay.
Most commonly, like it may have some dried fish if you're making it at home and you're making a special version, but the most common version that's traditional should not have any meat products. So that's one thing out of the way. And then I think the alcohol part, just read the ingredients carefully because I think if you're using commercially made ones, sometimes they add alcohol for maybe preservation or sometimes it ends up there.
Oh,
But the most traditionally made gochujang should not have alcohol as an ingredient.
nice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's a great question. Thank you. So next we have someone else on the stage. I am gonna butcher your username. I'm so sorry in advance, but it's Eramophilal Pestris. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask Ji Hye your question.
Hello, thank you for giving me the chance to do this. And I'm sorry about my username.
No, that's fine. I tried.
It's the Latin name for horned lark.
Oh, wow.
I'm a bird scientist, but I digress.
I love it.
Oh,
Go ahead,
amazing.
ask your question.
So my question is, Ji Hye, if you could choose how Korean cuisine could make its mark on mass market fast food, what would you do and why?
Oh, that is a tough question because I see so many, like for example, Shake Shack did like a gochujang fries or whatever. Yeah. Um, I think in the fast food setting, I would love to see like rice bowls. So it doesn't have to be bibimbap, but like a rice based with different toppings and vegetables on top. If we want to gear more toward like a burger category, there is a traditional meat patty dish called dakgalbi. So it's a kalbi is like a Korean barbecue meat, right? Most oftentimes made with short ribs. But if you diced it into a minced patty and use the similar flavorings, then that becomes dakgalbi, and that actually makes a really, really nice burger patty. But it's a little on the sweeter side, so I would put like a spicy pickle on there. So I think that would be a really fun one. I think what I want to see though is that Korean food or any food actually should be fun and it should not be dogmatic. And I don't want to see anyone trying to be too what's in their head is like traditional or authentic. because if you're Korean American and you want to have some kimchi in your burger, I think that's a totally valid and delicious way to have a burger, and it should not really play into the dogma or the identity politics, because we could be both Korean and American, and you could have a burger that's also Korean.
Oh, thank you for such a well thought out answer. And I totally put you on the spot too, so double thumbs up.
Thanks.
We do have a question in the comment section. Baked Breaded was trying to get on stage, but unfortunately had some internet issues. So they asked that we please pass along this question, which is, what is your most basic and easiest go-to dish for a Korean food beginner to try and cook?
Oh, there are so many. Korean food is actually really easy. You just need to have a well-stocked pantry. So if you do have access to Asian grocery stores or Korean grocery stores, I would get 3 mother sauces. And those are 간장, which is a Korean soy sauce, and gochujang, that I think the Redditor from the South of Africa mentioned. That's the fermented chili paste. And then doenjang, which is a fermented soy paste. Sometimes I like to describe it as, if you haven't seen it, it's kind of like a rustic Korean cousin of miso, in a sense that they're both soybeans that's fermented with a lot of salt. So if you have those 3 things, then the world is your oyster to make Korean food. So, for example, Korean barbecue would be super easy because the basic flavor is soy sauce and a little bit of sweetener. My personal favorite sweetener would be like a maple syrup or honey or even fruit juice. And then black pepper, ginger, and scallions. And then you make a marinade, and then you can marinate whichever meat or fake meat or tempeh or even mushroom and zucchinis, and then you can just grill it. And I think that would make a really easy, well-rounded meal. And if you have gochujang, and then just even mix that with a little bit of mayo and use that as a dipping sauce for your fries. That's also super easy. And we mentioned kimchi. So the easiest kimchi you can make is probably cucumber kimchi. You slice some cucumbers. You use a little bit of salt and sugar and let the water drain out a little bit for maybe half an hour or so. And then you just toss it in chili flakes, a little soy sauce, or a little gochujang, garlic, and sesame seeds, sesame oil, and you're good to go. You'll have a full-blown Korean meal that you can put together in like 20 minutes.
I'm going to give that a try for sure. I'm definitely a beginner when it comes to Korean food. So that's a really good entry level kind of idea for me. So I want to ask you, Ji Hye, about your restaurant. So I'm not sure if everyone knows, but on this talk, but your restaurant, which is called Miss Kim, that is in Ann Arbor, and you create your food there inspired by ancient Korean culinary traditions and adapted with local, seasonal, Midwestern ingredients, as I understand it. Can you tell us a little bit more about Miss Kim and what you guys do there?
Yeah, the way we describe it, well, way you described it, it sounds so grand when we say like ancient Korean text, but it's actually not that hard. I just, I'm not, I didn't go to culinary school in the United States, and nor did I really want to. So then I just I just wanted to understand that if I'm going to make a dish and then I dare to put a little bit of personal touch, then I felt that I needed to understand this whole like story behind that dish for me to be able to add it, and without exploiting it too much or going into that territory. So coming from that humble perspective, I just read, and I'm lucky enough to still read Korean. So I just read what's out there, and Korean people have huge amount of interest in cooking in general and culture in general, and old cookbooks from 16th, 17th, 18th century. It's just sort of readily available on what would be a equivalent of Korean Amazon. So I started ordering it and then started looking at it. But at the end of the day, it's really like my favorite part of the job is going out to the farmer's market. And right now is a really good time because all the summer vegetables sort of dwindling down, but fall vegetables are coming in. I just walk around the farmer's market and I start thinking like, what if my grandmother was here? What would she cook? Like she wouldn't be going around looking for the most expensive Korean ingredients that came through the supply chain. She would be going to the market. She would be talking to the farmers and try to get the best deal in the most fresh seasonal products, and then she'll turn that into Korean food. So, or Korean flavors. So that's what I try to imagine when I put things on the menu.
100%. I love that approach.
I think you mentioned, I'm sorry, I read a lot of articles with you recently. I can't remember where, but you said something about how a lot of traditional Korean texts go through a season that doesn't have 4 seasons, but more like 23. Is that right?
24. Yeah.
That's so cool. I never knew that before. That's so interesting. And it really speaks to the seasonality of Korean cuisine.
Yeah, but I think if you're in New York or anywhere, and you've hunted down that like 2 weeks that ramps are available, or like the 4 weeks that asparagus is available, like 24 seasons of a year is 2 weeks at a time. So you sort of understand what that means when you think of like seasons with the farmer's perspective, rather than like, broad four seasons a year. So yeah, try to get ramson that's available for 2 weeks.
That's awesome. All right, we do have someone on stage. Any paleontologist, please go ahead and ask your question.
All right, so this might be a bit of a silly question, but as far as interlap that exists between Chinese, Korean, and Japanese cuisine, what would you say as a first-hand expert on Korean cuisine? What distinguishes Korean cuisine from the other three?
I think that's an excellent question. Korean food and Chinese food, Japanese food definitely share some similarities, but I've also spent some time in Italy and looked at ancient cooking cuisines, and then what I personally feel is that human beings are actually not too different from each other. We come up with similar ideas. So one day I was looking at I think a cookbook from like a 16th century, and I looked at it and it said, take the cow's milk and gently boil it and it will curdle. But if it doesn't curdle, add a little vinegar or like a sort of sour rice wine into it and it will curdle. And then you can have that. What does that sound like? That sounds like ricotta to me. And then I found another recipe that was like puffed rice held together by honey, and then it's flattened and then cut into blocks. And I was like, this goddamn Rice Krispies right there from 18th century. So I think that generally we come up with similar things. There's head cheese. French is not the only one who has head cheese. Or we have something that looks like blood sausage. And Spanish use rice, and then traditional Korean blood sausage will also use rice. So having preface with that, I think still Chinese, Korean, and Japanese cuisine do share more similarities. We are a rice culture, right? So we care about rice a lot. But I think what sets Korean food apart is the fermentation and preservation. If I look at the 14th century cookbook, which is one of the first things that I can get, the oldest one that survived, every single thing is preservation. Like 50% of the book is preservation of vegetables, and the other 50% is preservation of grains in form of alcohol. So I think that this like a preservation and fermentation technique has really flourished in Korean cuisine, and that sets us apart. But I think if you're looking at different cuisine, I would say I don't think a food influence knows man-made country boundaries. I think that's why the border cuisines are really interesting. Like Tex-Mex cuisine is really interesting, but also the food that's on the border of North Korea and China is really interesting, because you start seeing kimchi with cilantro and coriander seeds, which is not really common at all in South Korea. So what I would recommend people to do is, instead of looking at like trying to find like commonalities, I would go more specific, because if you go more specific to that one part of town in North Korea and China border, or if you look at regional cuisine or even Buddhist cuisine, I find more connections with other cultures that way. So that's why I think that we're actually a lot alike than different. And what makes the tiny bit of a distinction between, I don't know, North Korean kimchi to South Korean kimchi, or like our version of Rice Krispie versus like Rice Krispies that's mass produced in United States. I think those things are what makes a study of the food super exciting.
I
I
see.
hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I just thought it was pretty interesting because of supposedly in the Northern Hemisphere, spicy food is not very popular. But everything I tried in Korean food was super spicy, so I couldn't figure out why they were so different. So that is a
Oh,
really interesting.
I'm glad you said something about the spices, because I think Korea has this reputation of having a very spicy food. But it's not really until like 17th century that, you know, chili peppers that's actually from South America came into Korea. And then you don't really see it coming out in cookbooks until about 19th century, at the end of 19th century. And if you study regional cuisine, and people say this about Italian food too, like Southern Italian food is more spicy than Northern Italian food. That's because Southern Italians are more passionate and hot-headed. We have the same thing. Southern Korean food is saltier and spicier, and Northern Korean food is milder. And Southern Koreans are stereotypically supposed to be more hot-headed. And I think those are the things that we assign. My family and my mother is from central part of Korea, where it's Seoul, where balance is really important, and not having it super salty or super spicy, but having a nice balance of food is really important. So I think sometimes what's being sold in a Korean restaurant in the United States may not be representative of all the diversity and variety that Korean cuisine can offer.
I think that's a really great explainer. Thanks, Ji Hye. So we have someone else on the stage, Queen Jamie. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask Ji Hye your question.
Good afternoon, Chef Kim. Thank you for being here. My question is going to be a little simpler. When I go to my local grocery store, I can't find bulgogi beef. Can you talk a little bit about bulgogi beef? And secondly, please, there's a traditional soup that is usually made on birthdays. I used to have a really good friend that made me a good soup one day in a Korean style. Do you have any idea what that might be, Chef Kim? Thank you.
Yeah, well, let's tackle the bulgogi question first. Okay, so it depends on how you like to cook it. Like bulgogi, especially what's most popular is the Seoul style, which is a thinly sliced meat. Most traditionally, it should be made with a sort of a nice steak cut, like ribeye, but it's sliced thinner. But ribeye is really expensive, and if you're slicing it thinner, you don't necessarily need to have ribeye. I would say like hanger steak is a really good cut, or like even short ribs are really good cut. New York strip or even tenderloin. But what I would ask your butcher is that whatever cut that you choose, if it's a decent enough steak cut, even chuck roast would work. Just ask them to slice it thinner. So if it's a bulgogi cut, you want it to be at least an eighth of a inch thickness. You can go as thick as a quarter of an inch or even half an inch. You just need to cook it a little longer, but no thicker than that. So I think it's finding any decent slice and then see if you can get it sliced thinner. Okay, so that's bulgogi. And then I think the next question was about birthday soup. It's called miyeokguk. So it's a really nice nutritional brothy soup made with seaweed. And it's made with miyok, which would be more wakame in Japanese. You may have better luck looking for wakame than miyok. It's sort of a leafy part of the seaweed that's dried that can be reconstituted. And you can turn that into like a different kind of stock. So my favorite stock that's really easy is just anchovy stock with some thick, like stocky Tashima seaweed. That's a really easy one, but you can also just saute some meat seasoned with soy sauce, garlic, and black pepper. Just saute that down. You can even use minced meat or burger meat. And then you add water and add reconstituted seaweed And then after that, you just sort of taste it and season it with more soy sauce and salt. If you want to go a little wilder, you can put some hot peppers in. But this is a soup that's generally served for the first-time mother. So you give birth and then you replenish with the seaweed soup. The idea is that it has a lot of iron and minerals that you may need after giving birth. So every year on your birthday, if you're an American kid, you get a big birthday cake. If you're a Korean kid, you get a seaweed soup.
Thank you, Chef.
Great question. Probably a little bit hard to put the birthday candles in a soup, I would guess.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple of times in this chat Buddhist cooking. And I believe I read somewhere that you were looking into making perhaps a smaller restaurant or some other type of operation that focuses on plant-based temple cooking of Korean Buddhists. That sounds so fascinating to me. Can you tell us a little bit more about that type of cooking?
Yeah. I'll tell you about the temple food first, and then I'll tell you about my idea. So Korean temple food, I think, is just amazing. They're like, these nuns are doing like local food before local food became fashionable, because there's all these like, guidelines for Korean temple food. And one of them is that you have to be within certain number of this like miles from the monastery. You cannot get it beyond that. So that's sort of, I was like, oh, that's like local food movement. And then they do a lot of growing of their own vegetables. So that's farm to table. And then they do forage, ferns and mushrooms in the monastery, because oftentimes monasteries are in the mountainside. And I was like, that's foraging. They were foraging and doing preservation and all that stuff before Rene Redzepi did it. And I think that's kind of amazing and hilarious, because they've been doing that for centuries without any fanfare. And then another thing that I find really fascinating about Korean temple food is that I think this goes back to the other Redditor who mentioned that Korean food is very spicy. So they do not use five different kind of allium-based vegetables. So no garlic, which is huge in Korean food, but not in Korean temple food. No garlic, no onion, no chives. I think there is let's see, no scallions, and then like another kind of local vegetable that I'm having difficult time translating that sort of look like leeks. Yeah, so no leeks. So all these alliums are banned from temple cooking because it's considered to be too exciting, too passion inducing. It's not good for meditation because it's too warming of a kind of food. So when I hear that, I find it super exciting that these nuns have dedicated their lives to Buddhism, but it's the onion that's gonna undo them, undo their life's work. Yeah, and to try to think about making Korean food or any kind of food without the onion and garlic is a super interesting challenge. It's like a Top Chef cook fire that they put on themselves without having anybody ask to do that. And then lastly, I find it super fun that even though they find alliums and garlics and onions too exciting and warming and like it's too passion inducing for them, they liberally use peppers, like chili peppers. They have no problem with chili peppers. And my guess is that chili pepper has not been around long enough, and it probably came into Korea after the restrictions on how to make temple food has already been established. That would be my guess. So onion, no good. Garlic, too much. Leeks, too exciting. But red chili peppers, use as much as you want. So I find all that really fun. And then they have all these like a fermentation going on for Korean mother sauces. So I think to get a lot of flavor out without having this sort of in-your-face flavors that Korean food is most known for. I think that makes Buddhist temple cuisine really exciting. And where do they get more kick? They use things like sancho peppercorns or Szechuan peppercorns, because if you think about it, black pepper is not really native to Korea. So I see the use of like spices, actual spices, not like chili pepper spices. I see more use of spices in Buddhist cuisine. That was more prevalent in older cooking in like a 17th century than it is now. So I think it's a just fascinating little branch of Korean cooking that not necessarily a lot of people have access to or look into. So now I'm going to talk about my food idea. I don't think I can cook without garlic or scallions. I can maybe do it with onion, but like I don't think I can give up garlic and scallions. But I do want to have sort of quick grab and go, really delicious vegan restaurant that's very accessible and very healthy and very tasty, and it does not incorporate modern technology like imitation meat, and I will have more than a few dishes that follow no allium rule of Buddhist cuisine, and I'll try to source as much locally as possible. But if anybody here is from Michigan or in that area, you know that January in Michigan farmers market is very, very sad. It's frostbitten beets, so not entirely just local food, but you know, pushing for getting as close to the ideal as possible. But yeah, I want everything to be under $15. I'm sure this statement will come back to bite my ass, but yeah, something that you can come and eat like 3 times a week, and it's happened to be vegan and very, very tasty. That's what I'd like to do for my second restaurant.
I'm immediately looking you up if I'm ever in Michigan. Absolutely.
Same. I also, I just, the no alliums thing made me laugh when I read that as well. I was like, oh, the alliums are going to be the thing that gets you.
Yeah.
So we have another Redditor on the stage, the Vampire. Would you like to unmute and ask Ji Hye your question? Nope, they've gone.
Oh, bummer.
It's all too much. I have another question though. From we have a Redditor in the comments. Okay with Gray asked you a question about other Korean chefs, and wondered if you had any thoughts or who you think is doing a good job promoting Korean food alongside yourself. Are there any Korean, food writers or chefs that you're a particular fan of that you'd recommend?
Yeah, there are 2. So one is he has a restaurant in New York City. It's called Mari. I think his chef's name is Chef Sung Shim. Unlike myself, he comes with pedigree, like Michelin 3-star experiences and all that stuff, but he decided to champion this like really humble street food called kimbap in his new restaurant. His restaurant is called Mari, which means rolled in Korean. And the main dish that he took inspiration for, and he's just running with it, is called kimbap. So kimbap is basically dried seaweed, rice, and stuff in the middle rolled. And sometimes people describe it as like a Korean sushi, but it's never Korean sushi because it's very different. Sushi comes from the culture of preserving fish, and then that's where the vinegar comes in later on. Whereas Korean food, there's no vinegar in the rice, and the variation is endless, but also it's the most humble, cheapest food you can find. You can find it at 7-Eleven. You can find it on street vendors. And he takes that idea and then turns it into the most beautiful tasting menu. So I think that's a really fun place to go with Korean food. And then another person that I highly recommend, which may be more accessible than a restaurant in New York, is Eric Juno Kim for New York Times. So he's a food writer. He used to be a food writer for Food 52, and now he's in New York Times. He's the one who wrote the Kimjang article in New York Times very recently. I think his recipes are really fantastic because he's taking his experience as a Korean American who's born and raised here, rather than sort of like me, where I was born and raised in Korea and then I moved to the United States. And he's taking that personal perspective and his relationship with his mother and sort of sharing what he cooks at home with his mom. And he put a whole cookbook out of it called Korean American, and his writing is wonderful. And I think carving out that American identity instead of having to continue to prove yourself to be one culture or another, I think that's really fantastic. And his recipes are great. So I would recommend those two people.
For what it's worth, I second that recommendation. I love his recipes. I recently made his cold noodles with tomato. So good. Definitely entering my rotation. And he made a version of Loft House cookies. So like you said, combining the Korean American experience, because Loft House cookies are pretty American. But I love his spin on them.
Yeah.
All right. The vampire is back from the dead.
Apologies for dropping out. Hey, Chef Kim. I have a couple of questions. I read that you started out like making mandu and actually like selling it. So the question is, are you a steamed mandu or a like pan-fried mandu person?
Okay.
And another question really quick is, what is the Korean food scene like in Ann Arbor? And then the last question, what does your mom think of your food? Like, is she always trying to tweak it or, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let me answer the Korean food scene in Ann Arbor first, because that one's easy. Korean food scene in Ann Arbor is really fun. I went to school at University of Michigan last time when we won Rose Bowl in 2000. And back then, it was like, 3 mom and pop restaurants that get all their ingredients from Cisco and had the exact same menu. And sometimes like tteokbokki and ramen and jjampong and 제육볶음. These are all different dishes, but they all tasted the same because they were using one sauce for all the dishes. But now it's a little more interesting because there's me and mom and pop stores are still there. And then there is this place called Bao Boys where they do buns with different Korean elements in there. And I think different chefs are using elements of Korean food to varying degrees of success. But I think there's some more modification and different variation going on with Korean food. So I would say definitely more interesting and fun than before. And I would still say a long ways to go compared to bigger cities. So that's Ann Arbor, Michigan for you. Yeah. And then, oh God, what was the first question? Before the mom one. I want to,
Oh yeah, it was mandu. Are you a steamed or like a pan fried? Yeah.
Oh God, that's a very, very, very difficult question. Okay, so if I have only 12 pieces of mandu, I would pan fry them. However, if I have unlimited quantity of mandu that I can eat, then I would steam them because I can eat so many more when I steam them.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. And then lastly, what does my mom think of the food that I cook? Okay, so she's the worst. No, but she's the best. So she's the best cook in the family. So she will never ever acknowledge that anybody else's Korean food is even remotely as good as her food. Never. It doesn't matter if her own precious daughter made it, and then I'm winning over. It doesn't matter. It's always hers is the best, and she's not wrong. So I know better than to compete with that. And then when she had my food, she said that it's really good, but I should charge less. That's what she said.
Nice.
And then every once in a while she'll come visit me, and we'll have a big like a kimchi class with the staff. It will be like a non-required couple hours of work that people can hang out and then chat with my mom, and we make kimchi together, and they ask a bunch of questions. And my mom is super charming with other people, not as much as with me.
They're always like that. Yeah.
Yeah, always moms. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, the vampire, for your questions. They were great. And yeah, I agree. Mums are always always like that. I think that's like a universal thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I've just invited John Crichton's cousin. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask Ji Hye your question. John, are you there?
There we go. I found the mute
Great.
button.
You found it, sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So I was going to ask the chef if they, especially in their local area there, like what brought Korean food into the forefront, like in the past 10 years or so, it's really jumped ahead and it feels like a lot of internet culture, but I wondered on a local level for somebody who, cooks professionally in an area, like, do they have a decent population there for first and second gen or?
That's a good question. So Ann Arbor is, at the end of the day, a very big college town. So we have a good number of Koreans and Korean Americans in Ann Arbor, but they're oftentimes very transient. So after 4 years college, they're not here anymore, or they're faculty and they're here for a while and then they're gone. But there is a bigger Korean American community about 45 minutes out of the way, and there is a big H Mart there and some like a tabletop Korean restaurants, and I think a lot of them are engineers because the automotive industry is big here. So there are engineers from Korean companies that settled here. So there is a good number of Korean American community here. But I would say, at least in Ann Arbor, it's not really necessarily driven by Korean speaking Korean folks. I think it's driven by Korean Americans who are born here and chefs who appreciate Korean food and ingredients. I think that's more driving diversity in Korean food in Ann Arbor rather than Korean American, the Korean folks. I think that also makes sense because they don't need to explore. It's theirs. They're comfortable with it. Their home cooked food is probably really good, and they can probably get good home cooked Korean food every Sunday when there's a church meeting on Sundays after service. So they don't feel the need to do anything with Korean food. I think it's when you sort of look at it with a different perspective than somebody who grew up within Korean cuisine and take it for granted, that more variations start coming through. It took me a while, like when I was not cooking Korean food professionally, just because I grew up in Korean cooking, eating Korean food, in Korean culture, celebrating the holidays, making 2,000 dumplings every New Year's. I thought I knew everything about Korean food. It's only when I started professionally cooking Korean food and felt that I had to look into it a little more that I started learning way more about Korean food. And I think you need a little bit of that curiosity to dig into it and then do something else than what always has been done before.
So you have a pretty varied population there for who comes into your places.
Yeah. We have. I have older Korean families come, and I think one of them told me that one of the very simple dish we have, it's soy butter rice. It's literally that soy sauce and butter and rice.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's really good because and that reminded them of their times in Korea in the 60s or 70s yeah. But I also have sorority girls who come in and love the cocktails and the snacks that we have, and I have faculties come in. I would say both my guests and my staff are very diverse.
That's great. It's interesting to hear a place like Minnesota. I guess it's because of that the engineering demographic. You get some like actual people from the country.
Yeah.
I'm in Maine here, and we have like a single Korean store in Portland, like the biggest city. And we've had like a couple of Korean restaurants pop up, and I'm super excited to try them out. But it's funny you say that about the buttered rice, because my family, we joke about how we could just be happy with a bowl of buttery rice and kimchi,
simpler the better. You just use really good butter and you're good to go.
What's your favorite kimchi? How long has it been sitting that's your spot? Because I'm not a fan of fresh. I like it to be like almost too far to where you should make kimchi jjigae with it, but still, it's kimchi.
Yeah, I have such appreciation for this fermented vegetable. So, I mean, it's like pickle. If you had to pick one, I'd pick cucumber pickle. That's the classic. That's the one that you go with. But my other favorites are scallion kimchi, like green onions, right during the spring, and then it's really pungent. You eat very little bit at a time. It's really good with more plain noodle soups and stuff. So scallion kimchi is really good. Cucumber kimchi during the summer is really good. It's sort of difficult to pick. Like whichever vegetable that's in season that was kimchi-fied is my favorite of the moment. But if I were to take Napa cabbage kimchi, I usually love it the best 4 weeks in because it's at the peak of the right fermentation level. It's still crunchy. Cabbage still tastes like cabbage, but then it starts to taste like something else than cabbage. So I like that, and then I like it 3 years in. The oldest Napa cabbage kimchi I had was from my aunt, and she took it out, and she made it 3 years ago. She kept it in a perfect condition with the right temperature and humidity that it still had good crunch to it. And yeah, it's like aged like fine wine. So yeah, 4 weeks or 3 years, but kimchi really is amazing, like any moment of the span of its zombie life.
Love it. All right. Well, we only have a few more minutes left with Chef Kim. So if you would like to ask your question to her, please raise your hand by clicking the hand icon, and you may be invited to the stage to ask your question. Let's see here. While we're waiting for folks to come on stage, could you please describe what is the perfect meal to you?
The perfect meal is not too different than what John Crichton's cousin said. So I would like a really good, well-made, perfect white rice and kimchi jjigae, that's kimchi stew made with the 3-year-old kimchi, and maybe like a fried egg to round it out. Like simpler the better, I think.
That sounds amazing. And I think we've probably got time to squeeze in another question. So we've got the real Pete Wheeler on stage. Would you like to unmute and ask Chef Kim your question?
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm coming at this. Sorry, I joined a little late, so hopefully you haven't touched upon this already. I'm coming at this from a little bit of a unique perspective because we actually used to work together. My name is Peter Duckett. I worked front of house with you. And,
Peter!
Hey, how you doing?
Hey!
So I saw you pop up on as I was procrastinating, and I was very excited to see you. But I'm not sure whether you talked about this already because I'm still in hospitality. I'm doing it out in California, and your a specific brand of, or your individual approach to hospitality really informed a lot of the way that I approach it now. And I learned a lot from you. And I think it was your sort of take on this classic Zingerman's approach to taking care of people and taking care of your employees and letting them take care of your guests and giving them agency was something that I carried on with me in my career and still do. But that was something that I always enjoyed listening to you speak about, specifically after, because if memory serves, you were doing the healthcare thing in Jersey and doing the 80-hour weeks and doing all that, and then the deli got you and drank the Kool-Aid as all of us did, and your approach to hospitality has been a very important influence on my life. So I just wanted to say hello and see whether you had anything that you wanted to speak on in that regard.
Thank you. I think you said I joined Zingerman's and drank the Kool-Aid, but it actually took me a while because I get kind of suspicious of any kind of a team spirit kind of a conversation or company culture. But I think I've been a server and I've been a cook, and I also think that like if you're serving someone and you yourself hadn't had a chance to sit down and eat, or you're in a place where you're mentally exhausted or not making enough money, I feel like the food that you serve is not going to be as good. Like you're going out to have a good time, and how can you have a good time knowing that you're being served by someone who is, I don't know, underrepresented or underpaid or have no benefits or overworked. So I think just approaching with a little sense of empathy is a good guidance for real hospitality.
I love that. Definitely, for what it's worth, I definitely felt it when I was working there. It was lovely to talk to you. Let me know if you're ever out in the Bay Area.
I will. Good to see you, Peter.
You too. Bye.
I love that. That's so nice that you had like a reunion on stage at Reddit. That was so cute. It was so nice to talk to you today, Chef Kim. Would you like to let everyone know where they can find you? What stuff, anything you want to plug at all before we wrap the session up?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, like most people. It's at Chef Ji Hye Kim, my full name. You can also find my restaurant online, misskimannarbor.com. And just shoot me a message, Korean food related or recipe questions. I would love to chat.
Thank you. And of course, as always, you can hear more from myself and Meg and our other co-hosts, Amanda and Justine, at Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes. You can find us on your favorite podcatcher, or you can head on over to podappetitpodcast.com. We release new episodes every other Monday. All that remains to say is that we have another talk planned here on Our Food. We have Rossella Rego, who hosts the popular web series Cooking with Nonna, so all things Italian food, I should imagine, and that is planned for Wednesday, October 26th, and that will be at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And yeah, if we get any other talks scheduled in the meantime, keep an eye out right here on Our Food, where we will let you guys know. All that remains is to say thank you so much, Chef Ji Hye Kim. We have really enjoyed finding out more about you and more about Miss Kim and everything Korean food. It's been a great talk. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter and Instagram at pod_appétit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.